We're going to bring up our second to last person of the stream today. Everybody welcome in Benny. Now, Benny wants to tell me that trans men and women are not men and women. So, Benny, before we begin, can I get your age and pronouns, please?
Age is 34, and pronouns are male.
Okay, so you use neopronouns?
Use what?
You use neopronouns.
Like neopets? What's a neopronoun?
No, neopronouns are like non-traditional pronouns because male isn't like a traditional pronoun in the English language. So you use like a non-traditional pronoun that's very progressive. You don't want people to call you by like traditional pronouns. You want to be called male slash what's the male slash male self, or what's the
You know what? He, him.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, Betty, you're going to tell me that trans men and women are not men and women. Go ahead and try to prove that to me.
Yeah. Start off. How would you define a woman?
An adult human whose gender identity aligns with their personal schema on the female sex.
So you think sex and gender are different?
Yes, I think sex and gender are different. Yes.
But then your definition says a schema related to their schema on the female sex. Correct. Which indicates that there's inherent traits in the female sex that are associated with a woman.
No, it would be just mentioning the fact that gender and sex have a linking together.
If gender is social, how does it have a linking with something biological?
Gender is a neurosocial concept. It exists both in society and it exists like neurologically in our minds, like our brains, like our genders.
How is gender? How can you tell it exists like in the brain?
Well, there's a few different ways to do it. There have been some studies on the brain that show that like trans people's brains more similarly match cis people's brains, but it's also more of a psychological thing. We know that like neurologically our brains tend to gender themselves and gender other objects. We know that like subconsciously, without any control, you tend to develop a gender identity, and that tends to exist in the hypothalamus. So like that would be how it's that's like neurological stuff, you know?
That doesn't make sense. If it's social, you can't track that in the brain because it's social.
Well, we're social creatures. It's the study of I don't think it's epigenetics is the study of that. There's a specific name for the study of how like social things tend to change the human brain and change how we think and how we do all this. We're like social creatures by nature. Social things do have an impact on our brain and the way our brains think and the chemistry of our brains.
That doesn't make no sense. So my name, Benny, is a social thing. Names don't exist in nature, so we create it.
Sure.
You can't tell from my brain that my name is Benny.
Nope. No, I can't.
So
what
it
does
doesn't
that have
make
to do
sense.
with anything?
Because you're saying social stuff you can track in the brain and see the effects of, but you can't tell me my name is Benny.
Yeah. So again, like I said, we have some. I have a slight disagreement with some of the gendered brain stuff, but we do have pretty strong evidence that when you are trans, your brain tends to more matchly align in a lot of different places, including like neuron. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it has something to do with your neurons.
So mental
as well
illness?
as the way. Nope. I don't
So
know.
mental illness?
I don't know if you purposely wanted to be disingenuous just there, or if it just came naturally to you. But no, that's not what a mental illness is.
Who's being disingenuous? I just asked if it was mental illness because you're saying
that would be a really ridiculous way to respond to what I was saying.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as I was saying again, we know that the way trans people respond to stimuli more closely matches their cisgender counterparts as opposed to their like a trans woman will respond to stimuli and like their brain will light up more similarly to a cisgender woman than it will a cisgender man, because like our brains, you know, are social things and our brains respond to social things differently. So
then sex and gender are the same thing. If we can tell that a cisgender person responds to a certain stimuli the same way as a trans person, that means sex and gender aren't separate.
No, that would like actually be showing that they are very separate. If they weren't, you would expect a person who's male, their brain to respond in the same way as another person who's male. But instead, a person who may be typically male, their brain may be responding in a way of a person that is typically female. This would like actually go completely against the idea that gender and sex are the same thing.
So you're talking real unscientific, right? Like honestly,
Nope.
okay,
I'm
I'm
quoting you
black.
direct
Can I be
scientific
white?
studies.
Can I be white?
Race is not an internal sense of self like gender is. Race is an external classification. Gender is an internal classification. So no, you can't like claim your race has nothing to do with like what lives inside of your brain. For instance, I'm not black because I feel black. I'm black because there's been a legal classification of blackness placed upon me by some sort of societal hierarchy. A sociology 101.
I know I'm black. I know I'm black. What do you mean if I didn't have someone else tell me I know
I
I'm
just
black?
explained it to you. If you have an issue with what I explained, actually articulate the issue with what I just explained.
It's not making sense what you're saying. That's why I'm having trouble tracking.
Is race genetic? Do you
Is
think
race
there's some
genetic?
like
Yes.
racial gene? Do you think I'm black because
Because
there's
I'm
some
black.
black
Because it's in
gene?
my genes. Because I'm black. Because it's in my genes. So my skin is black. So it's genetic.
Okay, are you incapable of having an honest conversation here, or are you?
No, it don't make sense. Like you're telling me
Okay,
you
but
can track social stuff.
it doesn't seem like you're
use
trying
studies.
to it doesn't seem like you're trying to make sense of it. Like I'm trying to explain this when we look at socially constructed things like race, like
Mhm.
gender, we can look at anything that's socially constructed. These things aren't all built the same. Some social constructs are based on internal things. Like the social concept of gender tends to be based on an internal sense of self and how your brain correlates your sex within itself and within your body. Then we have social constructs like race, which is a broad sense legal construct that has been placed upon society and social groups, typically as a level of oppression and hierarchy, right? It's the same way as how I would also say like age groups as a social construct. So whether you are a child, an adult, a senior, those things are based around like a number of times you've went around the sun in development, as opposed to some like internal sense like I'm not an adult because I feel like an adult. I'm an adult because I've reached a specific point in development, so society labels me as an adult, right? So when we talk
Mhm.
about gender versus race, I look at gender as an internal classification and race would be an external classification. So as an external classification, I cannot say I'm X and just magically become X. It's about whether or not I fit into the um, set level of societal hierarchy that puts me into X, right? When I look at gender
But
as an internal sense of self, you can be X because your brain labels you as X, because again, gender is internal, not external.
but if it's an internal, sorry, you said the word internal classification, but it's dependent upon an external classification. Like my internal sense of gender has to be informed by my external sense of gender. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a concept
No,
of gender,
no,
right?
no, no. So you're almost there. You're almost there. And I'm gonna pray that you're like getting close to getting it. Your internal classification of yourself is not dependent on, but informed by societal roles. So external roles that have been created within society. So like when we look at roles like men and women socially, what tends to happen is there are typical traits or behaviors or attributes that are associated with these things. And our brains have these things called schemas. These are subconscious ways that our brains categorize information. We all have them. We all do it.
Mhm.
If I told you today, if I said, Benny, go get a spoon, you just know what a spoon is, right?
Mhm.
That's because your brain has
Mhm.
associated spoon with a litany of characteristics that you just instantly recall. And this is the concept in
Mhm.
society and psychology. This is known as schema based categorization. It's a whole field of study. It does the same thing with gender categories. So based on subconsciously how your brain has taken in information around gender, if I said go point out a man, your brain would recall a litany of information. Or even if I just said think of a man, your brain would recall a
Mhm.
litany of information related to man that you would just instantly think of a person, man. Now it can be whatever your brain wants it to be. It's just that's how your brain relates to man. This is all subconscious. We have no control over the categorization that our brains do. It happens from birth. Like our brains are doing this from the minute you come out the womb. Okay. So when we talk about this in relation to gender, what happens is our brains have constructed this sort of map in our heads subconsciously of all of the different attributes related to man and related to woman. And what happens is we then, our brains, because they're so tied to the sexes, gender and sex are tied together, our brains now look at the way that our bodies are sexed. So our brains, and for somebody like me or you who might be cisgender, our brains, like, we don't even, like, there is no, we don't feel any difference because our brains are just operating in alignment with our sex, right? But somebody who's trans, their brain is saying, "Hey, I'm analyzing our sex." Again, they have no control over this. This is just done subconsciously. It's there's nothing they can do. Our brains have no control. Our brains are just analyzing our sex and go, "Hey, I know our sex is male. This doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
Something feels off." And then they look at the way we've structured gender and the attributes in society, and our brains go, "Hey, but these women here, this feels right. Something about these attributes and something about these connections actually makes sense in my head as a brain, and this feels accurate." So then what happens is, because of that alignment of your internal gender identity with the external attributes and classification, or the external attributes and behaviors or whatever else of this gender role, this is where you now as a person can go, "Oh, well, I'm a woman because I have that alignment
Mm-hmm.
there." Just like our alignments are with, like, for me specifically, I'm a cisgender man. I just know that I am a man. I don't really have to base it on anything, because my brain just knows. This is how their brains just know. It does all of this in the background, right? Because they don't consciously think about it. They don't go, "Hey, I have to consciously think about my brain's connection to this role." Their brain just does it. It's an instant process. This is why, if I were to say,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, Benny, are you a man?" you would most likely go, "Yeah, just because I am. I'm a man because I am. My brain is telling me I'm a man. There's nothing else I have to think about there." It is the same thing with them. Now, they might not have the words for it because we live in a society that is super cis-centric and cis-normative. So they don't have the word. Like, they might not know that, like, like, for instance, if I have somebody who's trans and they realize that they're trans from an early age, they might not even have the words to say I'm trans. They might not have the words to say I'm a woman or any of this, because society has geared them to believing you can only be a woman in one way. But that's just not the case when we look at how our brains work and interpret this information. So I hope that made a little bit of sense. I know that was a little long-winded, but it's a lot of information
So,
to put out
so,
there.
so if let's say I'm born on an island, there is no one else there but me, and
Uh-huh.
can I be trans? Because I don't see other people, so I don't have that social schema you said
So,
for like categorizing what another person is. Can you be
yes.
trans still?
So there would be a likelihood that you could still have a distress of your sex, right? There could still be an issue that your brain just doesn't align with your sex, but you having no context for other gender roles, you wouldn't have a way to
Mm-hmm.
know what you wouldn't have an idea of now that, first of all, you wouldn't have an identity to begin with. Typically, what we see of people that are born separate of society or who are kept away from society, they don't have an idea of gender at all because there's just no linking to that. But, like, yeah, because you don't have a concept of gender, there wouldn't be that gender aspect. You may still be trans in the sense of your sex does not align with your internal view of like your sex. So your brain might still, like, that dysphoria of, "Oh, I have a penis and this doesn't feel right on my body." That can still happen, but you wouldn't have any context to know what would feel right instead, or have any context of, like, the gender stuff. That, and unfortunately there's no way to test for this save for, like, when we found, like, feral children who were kept from society, so we know that they're, like, we just know identity doesn't form in those types of situations. But yeah, you most likely would not have a sense of gender, but your brain's sense of your sex would still exist.
So, and I say this with all seriousness. I see people in chat saying I'm dumb and stuff. Whatever, y'all dumb. But so should we brain scan babies when they come out to see if we can see the dysphoria?
You wouldn't be able to see dysphoria in a brain scan.
So we can see if they're trans?
Well, let me actually rephrase that. You'd be able to see the stress from dysphoria in a brain scan, right? You would be able to see, because dysphoria is just the name of the stress that happens from the misalignment of your gender identity and your phenotypic sexual attributes. So the dysphoria is just stress. That's all dysphoria means. It's just stress. It's an immense amount of stress, right? It's more stress than would be typical. So we could see that because you can see, like, stress levels in a brain scan, but you wouldn't be able to see quote unquote dysphoria. Like, that's not how that would be. Dysphoria is just stress.
Oh, let me chew on that 1 second. So what's the difference between, how would you define the difference between gender and sex?
So I would define sex as the biological characteristics related to reproduction. So, and I would define gender loosely as the cultural or social attributes typically assigned to those sex classifications. So, like, socially, how males tend to behave or look versus socially how females tend to behave or look. That's how I would define gender versus sex. So the easiest way is just think of sex as the biological aspect versus the social aspect.
But isn't that a circular definition if the social, cultural way, you said
No,
something about male
it's
and
not.
female there.
I mean, it's circular if you're saying that gender then refers to sex, but sex doesn't refer to gender. So there's no like circle there. It's not like gender is referring to itself. It's referring to a list of a typical list of attributes assigned to into either of the sexes in any like way you want to split it. This is why, like, in some societies, what's deemed masculine or feminine tend to change. Whether people are viewed like a really cool, not cool. Actually, let me rephrase that. A really interesting example is like, look at the fact that like black women were not considered women for a long time in U.S. history. Due to racial issues, they literally didn't consider, like, white women didn't consider black women women. They physically were like, you are not a woman, like, right? Because what it meant to be a woman is different socially, like, right? Like so that's why I say it's what is typical in any given society will then create what your typical gender roles are.
Oh.
And then how your brain relates to those gender roles and how it views its sex, that's what will determine your like internal, how you internally classify yourself gender wise.
But then how do you have like, with all respect, like, femboy trans women that are men, but they're women?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Okay. So let me describe the difference between like a trans woman and a femboy, right? So this is why I use the definition I use of woman, right? Because to be a woman, your gender identity has to align with that schema. Remember when we talked about like schema-based classification? Your gender identity has to align with that schema-based classifier. So you can have somebody who likes to wear makeup, who likes to wear dresses, who might even like to wear like fake breasts, who might like to feminize themselves in a lot of bits, but their gender identity doesn't align with that. They just like that aesthetically, right? So their gender identity still aligns. So that's why that you can have people who are cross dressers, you can have people who are drag queens, you can have femboys, right? They don't have that alignment, right? That's subconscious, and remember, it's subconscious and it happens automatically. So it's not like they can force it. Now, some do, and some people through drag and things like that do realize that they're trans, right? Through this process. But there are plenty of people who don't, right? There are plenty of people who are like, yeah, I can put on a dress because aesthetically, I like how I look when I'm dressed feminine. Aesthetically, I like how I look when I wear makeup, but I don't feel like I'm a woman. I feel like I'm a man who just likes this aesthetic.
Oh.
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie, like, I ain't gonna take up much more of your time, but you kind of convinced me, honestly. Like, I wasn't like super in the camp of it's separate, like I thought it was, but I ain't gonna lie, you kind of gave me a lot to think about there.
So can we get you, before you leave, Benny, can we get you to say that trans men and women are men and women? Are you willing?
I mean, it don't make sense how it wouldn't be men and women based on how you described it. Like, if men and women aren't inherently tied to like your PP and your VV, then, like, I guess, like, what stops someone else from being a man or woman? I guess it ain't my body. It's like, as long as they're happy and they, you know, I don't wish no ill will on any trans people or anything. But wait, can I ask you one last question? What does non-binary mean? Like I've
So
looked it up online, and it kind of makes sense, but it don't fully make sense. And then I
yeah,
promise I'll hop off.
no problem. So non-binary would just mean that you're a very easy thing is just your gender identity does not align with either man or woman, right? Typically in
Hmm.
our society anyway, we have a what is typical is a spectrum of gender surrounded against two extremes, that being man, that being woman. So you don't align with either of those. There are also non-binary people that may
Mm.
align with both of them, right? So they may align with both man and woman, and so they but typically it means your gender identity just doesn't align with either of your schemas around those two things. That's all for non-binary. It's just it doesn't align with that.
You know what? That make a lot of sense. And I have two aunties that are gay, and I've been supportive of them and everything. And I think I just need to expand my mind to understand gender more and think along those same lines. So I appreciate it. Sorry if I came in condescending or anything.
No, you're good people. We like people that are willing to like listen to the education here. So chat is pretty happy with the way this call turned out. Benny, thank you for being open to listening and understanding.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. Have a good one. All right.
You too. Now, if there was ever, hey, thank you all for watching this video. If you don't know me, I'm Jovan Bradley. I'm a leftist content creator who does debates, political commentary, gaming, and more. If this is your first video, thanks for sticking to the end, and I hope you subscribe. I post videos daily, and there are hundreds of past debates on my page for you to enjoy. Thank you to all of my YouTube members. Your continued support helps me create as much as I can. Consider joining. A membership starts at $2.99 and gets you access to our community Discord, early access to videos, and more. Shout out to my Tier 4 members, Zurith Moonpaw, Kazim, Never Again, Ovaltine, Sylvia Snow, Bamji, Emery Emojin, Ayla Ursus, Vel, Kelsey K, Jake Gorshander, Matthew Holloway, Vampy, Yemye, Mealy, and Dragon Nerd. Your continued support goes a long way to me continuing the fight for equity, justice, and education. Thank you again for watching.